Alright, so I stuck the motor in here, as you can see. And it looks like we got lots of clearance. It's only sticking back about 3 inches right now from here, and the middle of the door furthest sticks out about 8 inches. So we should have lots of clearance here. It's looking like I can get the pulley lined up. Even might be able to reuse the same belt. May have to get a tiny bit longer one. I don't know yet. If I pop the original belt back on here, if it will. Let's pull it back a little bit here. I can kind of see it's wanting to kind of give it a little bit of a twist. But even right there, that's pretty well, looks like eyeballing it. I mean, that looks really, really straight, which is what I worried about, the more the belt position. And that looks good right there. And then I can use a little belt still to drive the power steering pump, or not power steering pump, the hydraulic pump. So it does have the little belt here. I have the, right here, I don't know if you can see it real good, but there is the old bracket I left in that attached to the old motor. This is going to go. It's just going to be in the way now. But it's looking pretty good. So I think what I got to do now is I'm going to need to take that out. Let's see if we can see it real quick. So you can kind of see the, I'm going to get a little bit better shot in. You can kind of see the belt now, how going to the pulley. If I do it this way, I can always move the pulley further in, and then it'll line right up with this guy. But since the old high-speed one on the outside one, I'm going to start there and see how it does. So I think that'll be pretty good there. I'll mark out the base location. See on the intermediate plate. Draw around it so I can find the edge, and then I can figure out where the hole centers are at. And then I need to take it back. Then obviously I'll take it back out, drill it, bolt the motor to that plate, and then once that's bolted in, then we can start looking at some of this stuff. So I'm going to take, you can kind of see the pull cord is way up here. I should be able to loosen these bolts usually and rotate this whole housing, hopefully, so I can get it where you can maybe grab the pull cord if, like, say, the battery died or something, and you can just pull it in emergency pull start. And then if we look up front here, you can see the existing switch. It's the old on-off switch, and then all the wiring is kind of buried down there. You can kind of see it's kind of low now, so the dipstick tube, it's going to be a little bit of a pickle, but there should be room for a flexible funnel. And then I'm going to use an extension for the drain. Need some hard convert it over to like 1/4 inch pipe, so I can make a drain tube go back with a little ball valve or something in the back, so you can turn that whenever you want to actually drain the oil, because the drain is at the very front on this engine, so that's going to be a real hassle. And with the tank off, I can see all that, and then it's going to be interesting to figure out the linkages, how to adapt those, or just toss them and go with like a Morse cable type setup, and instead of the old heavy rods that probably aren't really even needed anymore with this newer motor. So let's mark it up and then take it out and drill some holes. All right, so I grabbed a straight edge, this ruler right here, and I'm just going to butt it up against that front pulley, and then I'm going to butt it up against my rear pulley here and make sure that I got, when I butt it here front, I'm going to make sure that I'm touching back here, and I can see that I got a little bit of a rotation here. So doing like that now, if I push up the front, my straight edge is hitting that front pulley and it's hitting this rear pulley. So this will be a good place to mark the motor now. But that way I know that my belt and everything will be aligned and I won't be tossing any belts. All right, so here's the plate. You can see where I was able to mark it. This is the back of the motor. It's kind of this light colored line here. And then up here at the front, it's about the only place I was able to kind of mark it. So the manual does have a hole mounting diagram, but of course it's not to scale. And then also the bottom of the motor box, it came with, looks like the same holes, I'll double check, but it was bolted to there. So I might be able to use that as a template if I can figure out how to line it up to this guy, to this mark, and then this mark over here. And then it'll give me my location of my 4 holes. So I think the first thing I'm going to need to do now is, these bolts are too long anyway, is I'm going to take this plate off from the original bottom plate. All right, so looking at the manual here, the outer edge, which is this line right here, lined up here at the framing square, I marked it at, is 132 millimeters over from the outer edge to the center of this hole. And then I measured, and from the outer edge, measured over to the edge of the hole, use some calipers, it's 8 millimeters. And then the slot for the hole is 12 millimeters. So that means from the edge of here to the center of the hole is going to be 14 millimeters. So I put another mark there, 14 in. So that should be the dead center now of my that first bolt hole there, because they don't really give you the good measurements from there. And then I can do the same thing as I can go down here, and now I can transfer this line here, center, over to here, and then I can put another mark, and I'll just transfer that, using that as a kind of a reference, and I'll mark out the rest of my holes. All right, so let's see, I marked all 4. I got this one here, this guy here, it's marked, this guy here, if my measurements were correct. Which I think they are pretty good. That should line right up. And I believe these are, yeah, so time to, did come with some bolts here. So I can see what size they're at. They're about 3/8, or maybe even 5/16. So I'll check and see about what size they are and use about that same size. So I did some checking, and a 3/8 does fit into the motor mounting holes, no problem, with a little bit of wiggle room. So that'll be the size holes that I'll drill into this plate, 3/8. Okay, so I got my holes drilled, and I decided to go ahead and just tap them, as you can see, so kind of make like studs. And that worked out great. So I already test fit it on the motor, and they lined it up no problemo. I just have to get some longer bolts, because these are about 1.25 inches probably, and I need about another 3/4, so probably 2-inch bolts, 3/8 bolts. Coarse thread will be what I'll need, so I need to go grab some of those because I don't have any. All right, so here it is. I put the plate on. You can kind of see how kind of the studs lined up there. So that was fine. Locking the motor up. Now let's look at the other side. Okay, so here's this side. So the only issue I ran into was this one. I couldn't stud it because the big rubber kind of washer that's under here, it was just a little bit too close. So I'm just going to use a bolt from up above and run into there, and it'll clear fine doing that. So I've got parts coming, so I can make a remote oil. So disconnect the oil here. So be able to have a little valve. Drain the oil. I already checked when it was in there. It won't be too hard to fill it with the funnel and check it. And then we have all the existing wiring here that we need to convert over to work with our dash. All right, so I've got the fill pump here. Seems like a good spot as any to mount. So take this back off so I can drill a few holes into here, and then the other intermediate plate is ready for paint. All right, so I got the holes drilled and tapped here for the fuel pump. So now we're finally ready to start putting everything together. So I found some old engine paint that was amazingly still good. Put my studs back in on the ones that need it. I kind of line it up, and then I'm going to need to adjust my these little vibration guys I got. I'm going to try and put them more right directly under the motor, more so to kind of add a little bit of support, and then put my bolts in. Alright, so it's all bolted in now. The intermediate plate with this plate. It's got those little things in there that are pretty good, so I'm not too worried about that anymore. So now what I need to do is grab I'm going to hook up a remote oil fill for it. So or not fill, but drain. So let's do that real quick. Alright, so I'm going to try. I'd taken this drain plug loose earlier so I could measure the thread side of it. I think it's a M12 by 1.5. So this thing comes with some oil in it already. I'm going to take that off. And then I picked up one of these adapters here. It's like a M12 by 1.5 to 1/4 inch pipe thread. So I'm hoping it's going to clear okay once it goes on. So let's find out. Put the washer on it. Now the threads are good. So let's give her a little tiny bit of torque here. Shouldn't take much. Seat that washer. Okay. And it looks like it's pretty well flush with the bottom, even though it's rotated a little bit. So let's push it back a little bit and see. Okay. So if I'm using that, it's kind of hard to see with the oil, but it looks like it's actually clearing. So that's good. That way when it sits up here, when it sits on the actual metal plate, this shouldn't be touching and vibrating or anything, causing any issues. Grab a rag here. And then what I got then is I have one of these stainless flex lines. It has like a 90 on one side and a little shut-off valve on the other. So I'm just going to connect this up, with the thought being it'll make oil changes way, way easier because I want to pull the motor out. Let's see here, get this started. A few turns here. Let's go grab a wrench. Okay. Try that. Check it for leaks. We should be good. And then now I have a little shut-off valve. These are like the same ones for like air compressor tanks. They're we'll see how it works out. It was a lot cheaper than buying a whole bunch of rigid pipe and Frankenstein that, but this way I can probably tie it up back here. Just use a standard quarter MPT, so I just put like a air hose, fitting with a barbed one maybe, and then I can use like some old rubber hose or whatever, and then so I can run it out to my oil pan. Whenever I gotta drain it, just slide it on, open the valve, and drain the oil out. We'll see how well that works. Sounds good in theory. And so far, so good. All right, so one thing when I was putting it on is this guy here happened to hit perfectly with my bolt right here. You can see I had to kind of bend him up a little bit. So I'm just going to need to order a fitting, like a 1/4 inch, little nipple, so I can space this out about 1 inch or so I have plenty of clearance. So it's something to keep in mind that I didn't think about. All right, so I ended up having to take my little oil deal off because to get it tight against the washer, it was just a tiny bit crooked, and that was just enough because there's not a whole lot of clearance for that to hit, and that was going to cause problems when I tightened it down. It may break it or something. So I went ahead and ordered one of these. This is a M12 1.5 pitch to 1/8 inch. I had used a 1/4 one, so it was pretty beefy. So I'm thinking an 1/8 inch one should be smaller, and then so it'll clear fine. It shouldn't be much bigger than this, and then I can use another elbow and take care of it that way.